I've got some serious and unnerving news. As a potential economic slide looms due to the effects of the COVID-19 virus, it's clear that most politicians and politically connected theorists out there should step as far away from the economic policy bar as possible. Why? Because their so-called answers to the troubles ahead will make things far, far worse. Hi, everyone. I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRCTV. And just as I'd recommend not relying on the government to protect you from a viral outbreak, but instead rely on them to forcibly take your money and further harm your personal ability to prepare and to end up harming your bottom line overall, I've got some scary news from DC regarding the economic moves the DC brains are considering, all of which will be long-term poison to the economy. As Eric Boehm reports for Reason, with markets tumbling and confirmed cases of coronavirus rising, President Donald Trump is reportedly considering a fiscal stimulus plan. Already, the president has urged Congress to pass a payroll tax cut and said the Federal Reserve should cut interest rates beyond what it already has done. Well, Mr. Trump has gotten it kind of right. Tax cuts are always a good idea, ethically and economically, if they're real tax cuts. But cuts in the payroll tax, which is comprised of the government tax theft for the shell games of the Social Security Trust Fund and Medicare, is cash that is still promised by the feds to retirees and future retirees. So without proportional cuts in those programs to offset this front-loaded stimulus, that will have to be made up by higher borrowing, i.e. selling more bonds and U.S. debt, and higher taxes, or an increased bond debt spiral in the future. In other words, if Social Security and Medicare aren't cut proportionately, we're talking even more generational tax debt slavery. Another proposal, mentioned by the Stanford Advocate, would see the feds defer tax charges for certain affected industries like airlines and hotels. It's not clear how U.S. relief would be administered or whether President Donald Trump's own hotels could be beneficiaries. Administration officials also disagree on the extent to which some of these measures could be done without Congress. But without cuts in spending, this deferral can lead to problems similar to those I just described, and has the added complication of further political tinkering, because these deferred taxes, when they are imposed, will see certain companies being unable to pay them. And that gives Congress even more power to play favorites for further bailouts and even more deficit spending. Of course, if Trump and the reality-hating U.S. legislative branch ever wanted to actually decrease taxes and spending, we'd be much better off. And so would our yoke-destined progeny. But that's unlikely to happen. So let's return to the core of the DC proposals, which, beyond tax deferrals and so-called decreases in the payroll tax, center around two forms of essentially the same thing: creating new worthless money out of thin air to so-called stimulate demand. As Boehm writes for Reason, others are pushing for even more aggressive actions. In an op-ed published Thursday in the Wall Street Journal, Jason Furman argues that Congress should swiftly pass a $350 billion stimulus to counter the mounting economic risks posed by the spread of the novel coronavirus. Brilliant. Pretend everyone is wealthier by giving them more colored pretend paper. Furman, a former economic advisor to President Barack Obama, prefers straight cash. Quote, Congress should pass a simple one-time payment of $1,000 to every adult who is a U.S. citizen or a tax-paying U.S. resident, and $500 to every child, end quote, he argues. an amount that would be even more generous than the 2008 stimulus passed during the Bush administration. A variation of this idea is to have the Fed continue its magic school bus ride of so-called quantitative easing, which is really just the creation of money through lower and lower interest rates that facilitate pyramid upon pyramid of pretend reserve leveraged liquidity in all U.S. banks, all of which leads to one result and one key economic lesson we can use anytime. The result is a skyrocketing of prices, and the lesson is about the simple supply-demand relationship of prices. See, Mr. Furman, inflating the money supply anytime is a mistake. It pumps more units of cash into the system, bids up prices, and causes malinvestments, as the early recipients of the cheap money think the economy is booming and think higher demand is natural. This sees new buildings built when they shouldn't be built, new businesses started that shouldn't be started, and employees hired for risky and poorly planned projects that normally wouldn't receive investment. The influx of fake money bids up prices until consumers realize costs are too high to afford, productivity hasn't kept pace, and folks begin to cut back. And that, of course, leads to the bust. The economic downturn is inevitable in those instances. And this case is even worse. You see, it's even worse if government pumps money into the system when the system is already experiencing supply problems. In a normal economy, a decrease in supply with no corresponding decrease in demand sees higher prices. These prices tend to offset demand and incentivize entrepreneurs to enter the market and increase supply until prices drop to a new equilibrium point. But if numerous governments and natural dangers forbid people from going to work, supply can't be increased. And flooding any high demand, artificially restricted supply chain with fake money will do one thing: cause skyrocketing prices. This is very important. These ideas of handing out stimulus cash or having the Fed drop interest rates to -1,000 are dangerous and as unconstitutional as the idea of the federal government battling a virus or any other natural disaster. There is no enumerated power granted to the Feds to hand out stimulus cash or license a central bank to print oodles of pretend money or fight naturally occurring phenomenon. Period. And it'd be nice if politicians and advisors out there bothered to recognize this as they play with our lives and the lives of people yet to be born. But too few understand the U.S. Constitution or economic reality. So it's unlikely that they'll ever be cured of this disease. It's up to each of us to protect ourselves and make our own cost-benefit judgments about our investments and how we protect ourselves from a virus. Those are the bottom lines. The economics of this are clear. The government has to be hands-off or it will simply make things worse. Leave our money to us, leave our decisions to us, and we might be closer to being what is called the land of the free. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you like these videos, share them with people because we know that social media has put the clamp down over many conservative and liberty-minded videos out there. And if you can visit MRCTV.org, that would be awesome. Oh, that's right. I know people have asked. Sometimes they don't get to see all the videos. Yes, this shirt. It is my favorite one. In Search of Real News. You can find it at mrc-store.com, along with all sorts of other great fashions. Thank you so much for being part of this circle of friends. I'll see you in the comments section on YouTube. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.